A 9-year-old boy stands at the checkout counter of a grocery store, his thin arms shaking as he holds his baby sister wrapped in a worn pink towel. In one hand he clutches a gallon of milk like it's his last hope. With a trembling but respectful voice, he whispers, "I promise I'll pay when I grow up." Shoppers stare, shake their heads and whisper cruel judgments as the cashier coldly turns him away. Just as the boy turns to leave, defeated, ashamed and empty-handed, a billionaire steps forward. What he does next makes the boy cry. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Ethan Williams, 9 years old, walked slowly through the grocery store, his small arms wrapped tightly around his baby sister. Rose was 13 months old, bundled in a faded pink towel that had once been soft but was now thin and worn, barely holding back the cold. Her tiny fingers were red, her weak whimpers pressed against Ethan's chest, no longer cries of panic, but the tired sounds of a baby who had already cried too much. Above them, the fluorescent lights of the Save Mart buzzed like restless insects, casting a harsh white glow over the nearly empty aisles. It was 8 o'clock on a cold Tuesday evening in December. Each time the automatic doors slid open, the California wind rushed inside, sharp and unforgiving, forcing the last few shoppers to pull their coats tighter and hurry on their way. Ethan shifted Rose's weight carefully as he passed the baby formula aisle, moving with the caution of someone far older than 9. The towel was all he had to keep her warm, and he knew it wasn't enough. In his other hand, Ethan clutched a gallon of whole milk like it was made of gold instead of plastic and dairy. His thin arms trembled from carrying both his sister and their only hope for tonight. He'd been walking for over an hour, his sneakers, 2 sizes too large and held together with duct tape, squeaking against the polished floor with each step toward the checkout counter. He could feel eyes on him, always eyes, watching, judging, looking away. A woman with a full cart glanced at him, her expression flickering between pity and distaste before she busied herself with her phone. A teenage employee stocking shelves paused to stare, whispered something to a coworker, and they both shook their heads. An older man near the pharmacy muttered something about these people and their situations to his wife, who nodded in agreement. Ethan had learned to make himself smaller when people looked at him like that, to take up less space, to apologize with his posture for existing where he clearly didn't belong. But tonight, with Rose growing heavier in his aching arms and the milk warming in his hand, he couldn't afford to be invisible. He needed help, and asking for help meant being seen. Behind the register stood Patricia, a woman in her mid-40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and coral lipstick that had begun to fade throughout her long shift. She saw him approaching and her jaw tightened. She'd worked at this Save Mart for 7 years. She knew what was coming. Street kids, beggars, sob stories, she'd heard them all. The store had policies for a reason. "Excuse me, young man." Patricia's voice cut through the distance before Ethan even reached the counter. Sharp, unwelcoming. "This isn't a playground. Where's your mother?" Ethan stopped walking, his heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. Rose stirred against his chest, her whimper growing louder, and he rocked her gently the way Mama had taught him. "She's sick at home, ma'am," he said, keeping his voice polite despite the fear crawling up his spine. "Mama had always said that good manners mattered, especially when the world was unkind to you. My sister needs milk, please ma'am." Patricia crossed her arms. "Uh-huh. And how exactly are you planning to pay for that?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Ethan had practiced this moment in his head during the long cold walk from the underpass where they lived. He'd imagined being brave, being convincing. He'd rehearsed the words until they felt smooth in his mouth. But now, under the harsh lights with Patricia staring down at him and Rose starting to cry again, all his practiced speeches crumbled into dust. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. He tried again, straightening his shoulders even as his arms trembled under Rose's weight. "I promise I'll pay when I grow up, ma'am. I give you my word." For a moment the entire store seemed to hold its breath. The background music stopped, the humming of refrigerators went silent. Even the other customers froze, turning to witness this impossible moment, a desperate child making an impossible promise. Patricia's mouth fell open, then her eyes narrowed. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes, ma'am." Ethan's voice was steady now, filled with something deeper than desperation. My mama taught me that a person is only as good as their word. I'm giving you mine. I'll pay you back every penny when I'm old enough to work. I'll remember. I promise I'll remember. This is a business, not a charity. Patricia's voice rose sharp enough to cut. You can't just walk in here and promise to pay later. That's not how the real world works, kid. No money means no milk. Period. Ethan's face burned with shame, but he kept his eyes on Patricia. Rose was crying louder now, her small body shaking with hunger and cold. Other customers were staring, some with pity, some with disgust, some with the careful blankness of people who didn't want to get involved. Please, ma'am. The word came out broken. She's just a baby. She hasn't eaten all day. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Then where are your parents? Patricia snapped. Why are you out here alone with an infant? This is exactly what's wrong with people these days. No accountability, no responsibility. Each word hit Ethan like a physical blow. His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back hard. Crying made things worse. Crying made adults angrier. Mama had told him that. I'm sorry to have troubled you, ma'am, he said quietly, his voice still polite despite everything. He turned to leave, his heart breaking with each step, knowing he'd have to go home empty-handed. Rose would keep crying. Mama would try to comfort them both while hiding her own tears, and tomorrow would be just as hard as today. That's when a voice cut through the harsh fluorescent air like a warm hand reaching through darkness. He's not stealing anything, he asked politely and gave his word. Everyone turned. Standing near the magazine rack was a man who clearly didn't belong in this neighborhood. His charcoal gray suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His silver-streaked dark hair was professionally styled, and his Italian leather shoes gleamed under the store lights. Everything about him communicated success, from his platinum watch to the confident way he stood, as if the world bent naturally to accommodate him. But his eyes, when Ethan met them, held something unexpected. Not judgment, not pity, something else, something like recognition. Patricia's entire demeanor transformed the instant she registered his expensive appearance. Oh, I apologize, sir. I didn't realize you were. I mean, this situation doesn't really. It concerns me now. The man's voice was deep and controlled, the kind of voice used to being heard. He walked toward the checkout counter with measured steps, and Ethan noticed something. The man was looking at him, really looking. The way most adults didn't. What seems to be the problem here? Patricia fumbled for words. Well, sir, this boy came in claiming he could pay later for that milk. I was just explaining our store policies. I see. The man looked down at Ethan, and for a long moment they simply studied each other. Ethan saw a successful businessman, someone from that other world where people didn't worry about having enough food. But what did this stranger see when he looked at a 9-year-old boy with a crying baby and empty pockets? What's your name? The man asked gently, crouching down so they were eye to eye. Ethan, sir, he whispered. And this is your sister? Ethan nodded, adjusting Rose's weight. She had gone quiet, as if sensing the shift in the air around them. The man studied Ethan's face, the determination beneath the way he held his sister protectively, the careful politeness despite obvious desperation, and something in the man's expression shifted, softened, opened. You walked here in this cold? He asked quietly. Yes, sir. It's not too far. But the man could see Ethan's blue-tinged lips, Rose's reddened fingers, the way both children trembled from more than just cold. He could see everything Patricia had chosen not to see. The man stood up and pulled out his wallet. We'll take the milk, he told Patricia in a tone that left no room for argument, and add some baby formula, bread, eggs, and whatever else they might need. Patricia's eyes went wide. Of course, sir, right away. But the man held up one hand, stopping her. His attention returned to Ethan, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the boy stand straighter despite his exhaustion. That promise you made, the man said, about paying when you grow up. I believe you meant it. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but not tears of shame this time. I did mean it, sir. My mama always says our word is our bond. I wouldn't break a promise. The man smiled for the first time, and it transformed his entire face. I know you did, and you know what? I think you're going to grow up to be exactly the kind of person who keeps their promises. As Patricia began scanning items, milk, formula, bread, eggs, fresh fruit, baby food. Ethan felt something shift inside his chest. It was small, fragile, but undeniably real. It felt like hope. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll remember this. I promise I'll remember your kindness." The man handed Patricia his credit card without looking at the total. Then he turned back to Ethan and said something that would change everything. "Let me help you get home. It's too cold for you to walk with all this." And in that moment, with Rose finally quiet against his chest and a stranger's unexpected kindness surrounding them both, Ethan Williams didn't know that his life was about to transform. He didn't know that this promise made in desperation under fluorescent lights would become the foundation of something bigger than he could imagine. All he knew was that tonight, Rose would have milk. Tonight they would eat. And sometimes, when you're 9 years old carrying the weight of the world in your tired arms, that's enough to dare hoping for tomorrow. Outside in the parking lot, the December wind cut like invisible blades. Ethan stood beside the stranger, Rose's weight becoming unbearable in his aching arms, the grocery bags at his feet looking impossibly heavy to carry along with his sister. "Let me help you get home," the man said again, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm Jonathan Hayes, by the way." Ethan hesitated. Every warning Mama had ever given him about strangers echoed in his head. But then Rose whimpered, her tiny body shivering despite being pressed against his chest, and he thought about the long walk back to the underpass in the dark and cold. "My mama always told me not to go with strangers, sir," Ethan said carefully, his natural politeness making even his refusal sound apologetic. "But Rose is so cold, and it's a long walk, and I don't know if I can carry her and all this food." Jonathan nodded, respecting the boy's caution. "Your mother taught you well. Tell you what, I'll drive you to wherever she is. You can introduce us, and she can decide if she's comfortable with my help. Does that sound fair?" Ethan considered this carefully, the way Mama had taught him to think through important decisions. "Yes, sir, that sounds fair. I think you're a good person." "Thank you, Ethan, that means more to me than you know." As they walked toward Jonathan's silver Mercedes, Ethan spoke quietly, preparing this kind stranger for what he was about to see. "I need to tell you something, Mr. Hayes. We don't live in a regular house right now. We're staying under a bridge. Mama always says it's just temporary, that we're just between homes. She says we should never be ashamed of hard times because they don't define who we are." The wisdom in these words, spoken by a 9-year-old boy, struck Jonathan with unexpected force. This child's mother was clearly raising him with values and dignity despite circumstances that would break many adults. "Your mother sounds like a very wise woman," Jonathan said, opening the back door of his car. "Here, let me help you get Rose settled safely." Together they arranged Rose in the back seat, Jonathan using his suit jacket to cushion her and keep her warm. Ethan climbed in beside his sister, one protective hand on her small chest, as if even now he couldn't quite stop watching over her. The car's warmth was immediate and overwhelming. Ethan had forgotten what real warmth felt like. Rose's whimpering finally quieted, and her eyelids began to droop. "Where to?" Jonathan asked as he started the engine. "Under the bridge where Interstate 10 meets the 405, sir. Near the downtown connector." Ethan's voice was quiet, almost apologetic, as if the location itself was something to be ashamed of. Jonathan knew the area. He drove past it twice daily on his commute between his office and his home in Pacific Palisades. He'd seen the tents, the makeshift shelters, the desperate faces. Like most people, he'd trained himself to look straight ahead, to not really see. Tonight would be the first time he truly saw what he'd been driving past for years. As they drove, Ethan sat very still in the back seat, as if afraid that moving too much might somehow break the spell of warmth and safety. But after several minutes, he spoke again, his voice small in the darkness of the car. "Mr. Hayes, sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Ethan. Why did you help us? Most people just look away." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer honestly without making the boy feel pitied. 35 years ago, I was about your age. My father had left us, and my mother was trying to raise me and my baby brother alone. One night, we were in a grocery store, and she was trying to buy formula with food stamps and loose change. She was counting coins, and people were staring, and I felt—" He paused, the memory still sharp after all these years. "I felt exactly the way I imagine you felt tonight." "What happened?" Ethan asked. A woman in line behind us paid for everything. She didn't make a big deal of it, didn't make us feel small. She just said, "I've been there, pass it forward when you can." And then she left. Did you? Pass it forward. I built a successful business. I made a lot of money, but until tonight, I'm not sure I ever really passed it forward the way she meant. I think maybe I've been waiting for the right moment. He glanced in the rearview mirror and met Ethan's eyes. I think tonight was that moment. They drove in comfortable silence after that, Rose sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, Ethan watching the city lights blur past the window. As they descended the exit ramp toward the underpass, the scenery changed dramatically. Clean streets gave way to cracked pavement, bright lights faded into shadows. The smell of desperation seemed to seep through the car's air filtration system. "You can stop here, sir," Ethan said quietly. "We're in that corner behind those big cardboard boxes." Jonathan parked and got out, helping Ethan gather Rose and the grocery bags. As they walked deeper into the encampment, Jonathan saw eyes watching from the darkness, wary, suspicious, calculating. He was an outsider here, clearly wealthy, clearly from that other world. Some people saw him as a potential threat, others saw him as a potential mark. Everyone saw him as someone who didn't belong. "Mama," Ethan called softly as they approached a corner where someone had constructed walls from cardboard boxes and old wooden pallets. "Mama, please don't be scared. I brought help, and he's a good man, I promise." There was a rustling sound from behind the makeshift shelter, and then a woman emerged into the dim light cast by a distant street lamp. Jonathan found himself looking at Sarah Williams for the first time. She was 34 years old, though homelessness had added years to her face that didn't belong there. Her dark, tightly coiled hair, though dirty and tangled, had been carefully pulled back from her face in a makeshift bun. Her deep brown eyes held a mixture of fear and fierce protectiveness as she took in the scene, her son standing beside a wealthy stranger, grocery bags at his feet, her baby daughter asleep in his arms. But what struck Jonathan most was her posture. Despite the ragged coat hanging on her thin frame, despite the obvious poverty and desperation, she held herself with dignity. Her shoulders were back, her chin lifted. She looked frightened, but not defeated. "Ethan," her voice was cultured, educated, with only the slightest tremor of fear. "Who is this gentleman?" Even now, even here, she used the word gentleman, not man or guy, but gentleman. It spoke volumes about who this woman had been, and who she still was, beneath the layers of hardship. "Mama, this is Mr. Hayes," Ethan said quickly, his words tumbling over each other in his eagerness to explain. "I went to the store like you asked, and I tried to buy milk for Rose, but I didn't have money. The cashier was going to send me away, but Mr. Hayes helped us. He bought us food, Mama, lots of food, and he drove me home because it was so cold and I was worried about Rose." Sarah's eyes moved from her son to the grocery bags, to Jonathan's expensive suit, to his kind but cautious expression. Her hands clasped together tightly, and Jonathan could see them trembling, whether from cold, fear, or both, he couldn't tell. "That was very kind of you, Mr. Hayes," she said, and despite her obvious terror, her voice remained polite and measured. "I'm grateful for your generosity to my son. I apologize for any trouble he may have caused. If you'll tell me how much the groceries cost, I'll make certain to pay you back as soon as I'm able. I keep a careful accounting of our debts." The dignity in her words, the determined maintenance of pride, despite circumstances that would have broken most people, moved Jonathan profoundly. This wasn't a woman who had given up. This was a woman who was fighting with every tool she had left, and one of those tools was her refusal to lose her sense of self-worth. "There's no debt, Miss Williams," Jonathan said gently. "It's Miss Williams, sir," Sarah corrected quietly, that same careful politeness evident in everything she said. "And I appreciate your kindness, but I wasn't raised to accept charity without acknowledgement. My parents taught me to always pay my way, to never take what I haven't earned." "I understand," Jonathan said, "and I respect that deeply, but I wasn't offering charity, I was helping a child who needed it. There's a difference." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "You're very kind to say so, Mr. Hayes, and truly, I appreciate it more than I can express. But I must ask, and please understand that I mean no disrespect, why did you do this? In my experience, People don't help without expecting something in return. There it was, the fear beneath the politeness, the wariness born from experience. Jonathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she had positioned herself slightly between him and her children, ready to protect them if necessary. "You're right to be cautious, Miss Williams," Jonathan said, deliberately keeping his distance, his body language open and non-threatening. "You're protecting your children, and that's exactly what a good mother should do. As for why I helped, 35 years ago, I was a boy about Ethan's age, watching my own mother struggle to feed my baby brother and me. I remember the fear, the shame, and the few people who showed us kindness without judgment. I promised myself that if I ever had the ability to be that person for someone else, I would be." Sarah studied his face in the dim light, searching for deception or hidden motives. "That's a beautiful sentiment, Mr. Hayes, but beautiful sentiments don't always translate into reality, and they rarely come without strings attached. What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Jonathan said simply. "I want to help you get back on your feet, that's all." "People don't help for nothing," Sarah said, her voice still polite but edged with the pain of experience. "Especially not wealthy men in expensive suits. I learned that lesson the hard way, sir." Jonathan nodded slowly, understanding the bitter truth behind her words. "You're right to be skeptical. The world has clearly taught you that trust is dangerous. But I promise you, Miss Williams, I'm not here to take advantage of you or your children. I'm here because your son made an impossible promise tonight, to pay for milk when he grows up, and something about that promise reminded me why it matters to help people when we can." Sarah looked at her son, who was watching the adult conversation with anxious eyes while gently rocking Rose. She looked at the grocery bags full of food they desperately needed. She looked around at their makeshift shelter, the soggy cardboard, the inadequate blankets, the damp dirt floor that would be freezing by morning. "Mr. Hayes," she said carefully, choosing each word with precision, "I appreciate your offer more than you can possibly know, but I need to be honest with you. I'm terrified of accepting help, and then having it taken away. Terrified of my children getting attached to stability only to lose it again. Terrified of what might be expected of me in return for your generosity." The honesty in her words, the courage it took to voice those fears while maintaining her dignity, struck Jonathan deeply. "I understand," he said gently, "and I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm trustworthy through my actions. If at any point you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, you can walk away. No questions asked, no obligations incurred." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Jonathan could see the war happening behind her eyes, pride against practicality, fear against hope, the desire to protect her children against the desperate need to give them something better. Finally, she took a deep breath. "My father used to say that you can judge a person's character by how they treat people who can do nothing for them. You've been kind to my son, when you could have ignored him. You're speaking to me with respect despite our circumstances. That means something, Mr. Hayes." She straightened her shoulders, making her decision. "I'll accept your help, sir, but I want to be clear. This is temporary, just until I get back on my feet and can provide for my children on my own again. And I will pay you back, every penny, even if it takes me years." "Fair enough," Jonathan agreed. "Though I want to be clear as well, repayment isn't required or expected. Consider it paying forward the kindness that was shown to my family decades ago." Sarah managed a small tired smile. "You're a persistent man, Mr. Hayes, but I'm a stubborn woman. We'll see who wins this particular debate." "I look forward to finding out," Jonathan said warmly. As they began gathering the family's few possessions, a process that broke Jonathan's heart with its brevity, Sarah maintained her careful courtesy, thanking him repeatedly but never becoming servile or fawning. She gave clear instructions to Ethan about how to carry Rose, made sure everything was packed carefully, and even apologized for the condition of their belongings. "I know it's not much," she said as she folded a threadbare blanket with practiced precision, "but we've kept everything as clean as we could under the circumstances. I've always told my children that poverty is a temporary condition, not a permanent identity. We don't have much, but we have our dignity and our manners." Ethan looked up at Jonathan with obvious pride. "Mama says that how we treat other people,
especially when we're having hard times, shows what we're really made of inside. She says kindness doesn't cost anything, and it's worth more than money. Your mama is absolutely right, Jonathan said, feeling his respect for this woman grow with every passing moment, and I can see she's raised two remarkable children. As they loaded into Jonathan's Mercedes, Sarah in the front passenger seat, sitting with perfect posture despite her exhaustion, Ethan in the back with Rose sleeping peacefully in his arms, Jonathan made a decision. He had planned to offer them the house in Santa Monica, but now he realized something. This family deserved more than just temporary shelter. They deserved a chance to rebuild their lives completely, with support and resources, and the opportunity to reclaim what had been taken from them. "Where are we going, Mr. Hayes?" Sarah asked as he pulled out of the underpass. "I have a house in Santa Monica," Jonathan said. "It's currently vacant. My last tenants moved out 2 weeks ago. It's fully furnished and ready for someone to live in. I'd like to offer it to you and your children while you get back on your feet." Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mr. Hayes, we can't possibly accept." "Please," Jonathan interrupted gently. "Let me finish. I'm not giving you the house. I'm offering you a safe place to stay while you rebuild your life. There's no rent, no obligations beyond keeping the place in good condition. You can stay as long as you need to, and when you're ready to move forward on your own terms, you're free to do so." Sarah's hands twisted together in her lap. "Why would you do this for strangers? Please, Mr. Hayes, I need to understand. Nobody is this kind without a reason." Jonathan kept his eyes on the road as he answered, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. 5 years ago, my wife died of cancer. We never had children. I built a successful business, accumulated more money than I could ever spend, and found myself living alone in a big empty house, wondering what the point of it all was. He glanced at Sarah. "When I heard your son tonight, speaking with such courtesy and dignity despite his desperation, making that impossible promise because his family needed help, it reminded me that maybe the point isn't what we accumulate. Maybe it's what we do for others when we have the chance." He paused, then continued. "You've clearly raised your children with strong values despite incredibly difficult circumstances. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Miss Williams. And if I can help a family like yours, if I can be the person who makes a difference when it really matters, then maybe my life has more purpose than I thought." Sarah wiped tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes, not just for the help, but for treating us like human beings worthy of respect. You have no idea how rare that's become for people in our situation." In the back seat, Ethan held Rose close and looked out the window as the city lights blurred past, heading towards something that felt remarkably like hope. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if this kindness would last, or fade like so many other promises the world had made and broken. But tonight, Rose would have milk. Tonight, they would be warm. Tonight, Mama's shoulders had relaxed just slightly, that constant tension easing for the first time in months. And sometimes, when you're 9 years old carrying the weight of the world in your tired arms, that's enough to believe in tomorrow. The drive to Santa Monica took 30 minutes, and with each passing mile, Sarah felt herself moving between two worlds. Behind them lay the underpass, the cardboard shelter, the constant struggle for survival. Ahead lay something she was almost afraid to hope for: safety, warmth, stability. When they pulled up in front of the house, Sarah had to press her hand against her chest to steady her racing heart. It was a charming 2-story home, with pale blue siding and white trim. A small front yard, had a neat lawn and a path leading to a front porch with a swing. Warm lights glowed through the windows, making the house look like something from a dream she'd had long ago, before life had taught her that dreams were dangerous things to hold on to. "This is beautiful, Mr. Hayes," Sarah said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" "I'm certain," Jonathan said, turning off the engine. "Come inside, let me show you around." He helped them out of the car, carrying the grocery bags, while Sarah carried Rose and Ethan walked close beside them, his eyes wide with wonder. Jonathan unlocked the front door, and gestured for them to enter first.
"There are 2 bedrooms upstairs," Jonathan said. The larger one has a queen-sized bed and the smaller one has a twin bed. I took the liberty of having a crib delivered this afternoon and set up. I hope that was all right." Sarah turned to him, tears flowing freely now. "You had a crib delivered, but you only met us an hour ago. How did you?" Jonathan looked slightly embarrassed. "I called ahead from the grocery store parking lot while you were gathering your things. I have an assistant who's very efficient at handling requests on short notice. I hope that doesn't seem presumptuous. I just wanted to make sure you'd have what you needed tonight." "Presumptuous," Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. "Mr. Hayes, it's the kindest thing anyone has done for us in, I can't even remember how long." Ethan had already started exploring, moving from room to room with careful reverence, as if afraid that touching anything too firmly might make it all disappear. "Mama, come look," he called from upstairs. "There are real beds with actual mattresses, and the crib is so nice and clean." Sarah climbed the stairs slowly, still holding Rose, with Jonathan following at a respectful distance. The bedrooms were simple but comfortable. The larger room had a full-sized bed with clean white linens that looked impossibly soft. The smaller room had a twin bed, and as promised, a sturdy wooden crib with a new mattress and fresh bedding. "The bathroom is through there," Jonathan indicated a door off the hallway. "It has a bathtub with hot water. Towels are in the cabinet, along with soap, shampoo and other basics. The kitchen is fully stocked with essentials. We can go shopping tomorrow for anything else you need. There are also clothes in the closets that should fit everyone, at least temporarily." Sarah set Rose down carefully in the crib, watching her daughter settle onto the soft mattress without waking. Then she turned to Jonathan, struggling to maintain her composure. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know what to say. This is beyond generous. It's overwhelming. I feel like I'm in a dream that I'm going to wake up from at any moment." "It's not a dream," Jonathan said gently. "It's just a safe place for you and your children while you rebuild your life. That's all. Nothing more complicated than that." "But it is complicated," Sarah said, her natural honesty compelling her to voice her fears. "Nothing this good comes without complications, without expectations, without strings attached." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, understanding that her wariness came from painful experience. "What happened to you, Miss Williams, to make you so certain that kindness always comes with strings?" Sarah looked down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly. "I used to have a good job, Mr. Hayes. I was a paralegal at Morrison & Associates, one of the biggest law firms in Los Angeles. I worked there for 6 years. I was good at what I did, really good. I was being considered for promotion to senior paralegal." She paused, gathering the courage to continue. "Then I got pregnant with Rose. It wasn't planned and her father left immediately, but I was determined to make it work. I thought my employer would support me. I'd been a loyal, dedicated employee for years." Her voice hardened slightly. "But my supervisor, Thomas Bryant, started treating me differently the moment I announced my pregnancy. He questioned my commitment to the firm. He gave my best cases to other people. He made comments about how mothers couldn't handle demanding hours, how pregnancy made women unreliable." Jonathan's jaw tightened with anger on her behalf, but he remained silent, letting her tell her story. "After Rose was born and I came back from maternity leave, he found reasons to criticize everything I did," Sarah continued. "He created impossible standards, then documented every tiny mistake. 3 months after I returned, he fired me for performance issues that he had manufactured out of thin air." She looked up at Jonathan, her eyes bright with unshed tears and suppressed rage. "I tried to fight it, Mr. Hayes. I knew it was discrimination. But Thomas Bryant had documented everything so carefully that it looked legitimate on paper. And I couldn't afford a lawyer to take on one of the biggest law firms in Los Angeles, not as a single mother with a newborn and a 9-year-old. That's illegal discrimination," Jonathan said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "What he did to you was wrong. Wrong, yes, but also common," Sarah said bitterly. "Especially for women who don't have resources to fight back. After that, I couldn't get hired anywhere else in the legal field. Thomas Bryant has connections throughout the industry. He spread rumors that I was difficult, unreliable, that I'd filed false complaints against the firm. Every door I tried to open was already closed before I could knock." She took a shaky breath. "So you see, Mr. Hayes, my experience has taught me that people with power, especially wealthy men, use that power to hurt people like me. They take advantage, they destroy careers, they break families. That's why I'm terrified right now. That's why I can't quite believe in your kindness, no matter how genuine it seems." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, processing her story and understanding the depth of her trauma. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said finally. "Thomas Bryant is a coward who abused his power, and you deserve better. You still deserve better." He met her eyes directly. "I can't change what he did to you, and I can't undo the damage it's caused. But I can promise you this, I will never use my resources or position to hurt you or your children. I will never make you feel diminished or dependent. And if at any point I make you uncomfortable, you can tell me to leave, and I will, with no hard feelings and no consequences." Sarah studied his face, searching for deception or hidden agendas. But all she saw was sincerity and a deep sadness that matched her own, the sadness of someone who had also experienced profound loss and was trying to find meaning in its wake. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "I want to trust that this is real, that you're genuine. But I'm so afraid, Mr. Hayes. Afraid of depending on someone who might leave. Afraid of my children getting attached to stability only to lose it. Afraid of what might be expected of me when your kindness runs out." "Then don't trust me yet," Jonathan said gently. "Just accept the help for tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk about next steps, and every day after that I'll try to earn your trust through my actions, not just my words. How does that sound?" Sarah nodded slowly. "That sounds manageable. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, for understanding my fear instead of being offended by it." "Fear born from experience isn't something to be offended by," Jonathan said. "It's something to be respected and carefully addressed. Now I should let you and your children rest. You've had a long, difficult day." He wrote his phone number on a piece of paper and left it on the kitchen counter. "Call me if you need anything, day or night. I'll come by tomorrow around 10 to check on you and discuss what happens next. Does that work?" "Yes, sir. That works. Thank you again, Mr. Hayes, for everything." After Jonathan left, Sarah stood in the living room for a long moment, almost afraid to move, to touch anything, to believe this was real. Then she heard Ethan call from upstairs. "Mama? Can we really stay here? Is it safe?" Sarah climbed the stairs to find her son sitting on the edge of the twin bed, looking small and uncertain in the clean, comfortable room. She sat beside him and pulled him close. "I think so, baby. I think Mr. Hayes is a good man. But we need to be careful, okay? We need to take things one day at a time." "He kept his word," Ethan said thoughtfully. "He said he'd help us, and he did. You always say that keeping your word is the most important thing." "I do say that," Sarah agreed. "And you're right, he did keep his word. That's a good sign." That night, after bathing both children in warm, clean water, a luxury that made all three of them cry with relief, Sarah tucked Ethan into the twin bed and rose into the crib. She kissed them both, whispering prayers of gratitude that she'd almost forgotten how to say. Then she went to the larger bedroom, locked the door out of habit and old fear, and allowed herself to completely fall apart. She cried for the months of struggle, for the fear and shame and exhaustion. She cried for what had been taken from her, and for this unexpected gift that had been given. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she took a long hot shower, washing away months of dirt and desperation. When she finally crawled into bed, a real bed with soft sheets and a warm blanket, Sarah Williams allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better from here. In the next room, Ethan lay awake for a while longer, thinking about the promise he'd made in the grocery store. He'd promised to pay Mr. Hayes back when he grew up. It had seemed like an impossible promise at the time, something he'd said out of desperation. But now, lying in a real bed in a safe house, with his sister sleeping peacefully and his mother's exhausted sobs finally quieting in the next room, Ethan understood something important. Some promises take a lifetime to keep. And he intended to keep this one, no matter how long it took. He closed his eyes and whispered into the darkness, "I promise, Mr. Hayes, I'll remember. I'll pay you back someday. I promise." And somewhere across the city, Jonathan Hayes sat in his own empty house, thinking about a 9-year-old boy who made impossible promises, and a woman who maintained her dignity despite the world's cruelty. For the first time in 5 years, since his wife's death, Jonathan felt something stirring in his chest that felt remarkably like purpose.
The next morning, Sarah woke up disoriented, momentarily panicking when she didn't recognize her surroundings. Then memory returned, the grocery store, Jonathan Hayes, this house, and she sat up slowly, half expecting it all to have been a dream. But no, she was in a real bed in a real room. Through the window, she could see morning sunlight and hear birds singing instead of highway traffic and human desperation. She quickly got dressed in one of the clean outfits from the closet, simple jeans and a sweater that fit reasonably well, and went to check on her children. Rose was awake in her crib, babbling happily and playing with her toes. Ethan was still asleep, his face peaceful in a way Sarah hadn't seen in months. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching them, feeling gratitude so intense it was almost painful. Downstairs, she discovered the kitchen was indeed fully stocked. Fresh eggs, milk, bread, fruit, coffee, everything needed for a proper breakfast. Sarah's hands trembled as she started the coffee maker, the simple act of pressing a button and hearing the machine purr to life, feeling like a luxury beyond measure. She was scrambling eggs when Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking small and uncertain in clothes that were slightly too big for him. "Mama, is this real? Did it really happen?" Sarah held out her arms and he ran to her, pressing his face against her shoulder. "It's real, baby. We're safe. At least for now." "For now," Ethan repeated, understanding the qualification. Nothing in their lives had ever been permanent. Why would this be different? They were eating breakfast, a real breakfast, at a real table when the doorbell rang at precisely 10 o'clock. Sarah's entire body tensed, old fears flooding back. But Ethan jumped up excitedly. "That's Mr. Hayes, he said he'd come at 10. Sarah opened the door to find Jonathan standing on the porch, dressed more casually today in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He held 2 bags, one from a local bakery, one from a children's clothing store. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "I brought fresh croissants and some clothes for the kids that should fit better than whatever was in the closets. May I come in?" "Of course, Mr. Hayes, please." Sarah stepped aside, her natural courtesy overriding her nervousness. Over coffee and croissants, Ethan's eyes went wide at the buttery, flaky pastry. They discussed practical matters. Ethan needed to be enrolled in school. Rose needed to see a pediatrician. Sarah needed help navigating the process of rebuilding her professional life. "I want to contribute, Mr. Hayes," Sarah said firmly, her pride requiring her to establish this immediately. "I'm not comfortable simply accepting charity indefinitely. If you're serious about letting us stay here, I need to earn my keep somehow. I could help maintain the property, handle administrative tasks for you, anything that would allow me to feel I'm paying my way." Jonathan set down his coffee cup. "I appreciate that, Sarah. May I call you Sarah?" She nodded. "Sarah, I want you to understand something important. You're not a charity case to me. You're a capable woman who has experienced temporary setbacks due to circumstances largely beyond your control. What you need isn't charity, it's opportunity and support. There's a significant difference." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you for seeing it that way, Mr. Hayes. Most people don't. Most people see the homelessness and assume failure or fault. Then most people are wrong," Jonathan said simply. "Now let's talk about getting you back into the professional world where you clearly belong." Over the following weeks, Jonathan proved true to his word in ways that continually surprised Sarah. He never pushed, never made demands, never treated her as anything less than an equal despite their vastly different circumstances. He helped Ethan enroll in the local elementary school, where testing quickly revealed the boy was reading at a 6th grade level despite his months away from formal education. "Your son is exceptional," the school counselor told Sarah. "Despite the disruption to his education, he's performing well above grade level in reading and math, and his courtesy toward other students and teachers is remarkable. You've clearly raised him with strong values, Mrs. Williams." "Miss Williams," Sarah corrected gently, "and thank you. I've always believed that our circumstances don't have to define our character." Rose's pediatrician appointment confirmed what Sarah had feared. Her daughter was underweight and showing signs of malnutrition, but the doctor was optimistic. "With proper nutrition and consistent care, she'll thrive," Dr. Anderson assured Sarah. "You got her help just in time. Another month or two, and we'd be looking at more serious developmental delays." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Another month or two, without Jonathan's intervention, they wouldn't have made it another month or two. Rose might have suffered permanent damage because of circumstances Sarah couldn't control. "Hey," Jonathan said gently, noticing her distress as they left the pediatrician's office. "Don't go down that road. Don't blame yourself for things you couldn't change. You did the best you could with what you had, and now Rose is going to be fine. That's what matters." But it was Sarah's professional recovery that proved most complex. Jonathan connected her with his company's human resources director, a sharp woman named Victoria Palmer, who had extensive contacts throughout the legal field. "Your resume is impressive," Victoria said after reviewing Sarah's work history during their first meeting. "Your experience at Morrison & Associates should make you highly marketable. But I'm seeing a troubling pattern here. You've applied to 17 different firms in the past year with no responses. That's extremely unusual for someone with your qualifications." Sarah took a deep breath, preparing to tell her story again. "I believe I've been blacklisted. My former supervisor, Thomas Bryant, made false accusations about my performance after I returned from maternity leave. He was angry that I'd become pregnant. He said it showed a lack of commitment to the firm. After he fired me using manufactured performance issues, I believe he spread rumors throughout the legal community." Victoria's expression hardened with professional anger. "That's textbook illegal discrimination. Have you considered legal action?" "With what resources?" Sarah asked quietly, without bitterness. "Thomas Bryant is a senior partner at one of the most powerful law firms in Los Angeles. I was a paralegal struggling to feed my children. The law doesn't always protect the people who need it most, Miss Palmer. I learned that lesson painfully." "You're absolutely right about that," Victoria said. "But here's what we can do. Jonathan's firm needs someone with legal compliance expertise. We deal with complex regulatory issues that require someone who can navigate legal documentation and requirements with precision. Would you be interested in that kind of work?" Sarah hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. "I don't want to accept a position just because Mr. Hayes is being kind. I need to know I'd actually be earning my place based on my own qualifications." Victoria smiled with genuine respect. "Jonathan specifically anticipated you might feel that way, so he asked me to handle your interview and hiring decision completely independently. He won't influence my evaluation of your qualifications in any way. He won't even know I'm meeting with you unless I decide you're the right fit for the position." Over the next week, Sarah went through a rigorous interview process that included skills assessments, writing samples, and meetings with various department heads. It was exhausting but also exhilarating. She was being evaluated on her merits, on her actual abilities, not on rumors or discrimination. When Victoria finally called with the job offer, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner. She listened to the details: legal compliance coordinator, decent starting salary, benefits, opportunities for advancement, and felt something crack open in her chest. "Miss Palmer, I need to know something honestly. Did I get this job because of Mr. Hayes? Please, I need the truth." "You got this job because you're the most qualified candidate we interviewed," Victoria said firmly. "You scored highest on the skills assessment, your writing samples were exceptional, and every person who met with you was impressed by your knowledge and professionalism. Jonathan Hayes had nothing to do with my decision. In fact, I haven't even told him yet that you were the candidate I selected." When Sarah told Jonathan the news that evening, she was beaming with genuine pride for the first time in over a year. "Victoria made it very clear that you didn't influence her decision," she said, unable to keep the happiness out of her voice. "She said I earned this position on my own qualifications. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, Jonathan, for giving me that gift. The chance to succeed on my own merits. That's exactly what you deserve," Jonathan said warmly. "Congratulations, Sarah. I never doubted you'd impress them." As Sarah's first week of work progressed, she discovered something unexpected. She was good at this. Really good. The skills she'd developed as a paralegal translated perfectly to compliance work, and her attention to detail caught several potential regulatory issues that others had missed. "You're a natural at this," her supervisor told her after her second week. "We're lucky to have you on the team." For the first time in over a year, Sarah felt like herself again. Not the desperate woman living under a bridge, not the victim of discrimination and circumstance, but Sarah Williams, intelligent, capable, valuable. 3 months into their new life, just as stability began to feel almost real, the shadow of Sarah's past reached out to shatter their fragile peace. It was a Thursday evening in March. Sarah was working late at the office, finishing a complicated compliance report. Jonathan had offered to pick up Ethan from school and watch both children until she got home, an arrangement that had become comfortable for everyone involved. They were making dinner together, Jonathan carefully supervising while Ethan practiced cracking eggs into a bowl, when Sarah's phone rang. The number was blocked, but she answered anyway. Sarah Williams. The voice was male, cold, familiar in a way that made her blood run cold. Yes, who is this? It's Thomas Bryant. From Morrison and Associates. Remember me? Sarah's hands went numb. She stepped away from her desk, moving to a private conference room. Mr. Bryant, what do you want? I heard some interesting news, Thomas said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Apparently you've landed on your feet, working at Hayes Capital Management, living in a nice house in Santa Monica. That's quite a recovery for someone who was fired for performance issues. Sarah's heart pounded. What do you want? She repeated. I want you to understand something, Sarah. I worked very hard to establish certain narratives about your capabilities and reliability. And now you're working at a prominent firm, which raises questions about those narratives. Questions I can't afford to have people asking. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you that I have significant influence in this industry. One word from me, and Hayes Capital starts receiving calls about the unreliable, difficult ex-employee they made the mistake of hiring. Sarah's voice went cold. I earned my position at Hayes Capital through my own qualifications. I went through an independent interview process, and if you try to sabotage my career again, Mr. Bryant, I will file a formal complaint with the State Bar Association for discrimination and harassment. With what evidence? Thomas laughed. I documented everything carefully, Sarah. You know that, and who's going to believe a formerly homeless woman over a senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious firms? He paused, letting his words sink in. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to quietly resign from Hayes Capital. You're going to cite personal reasons, thank them for the opportunity, and disappear back into whatever hole you crawled out of. If you do that, I'll leave you alone. If you don't, I'll make sure you never work in a professional capacity again. Are we clear? Sarah's hands trembled with rage and fear. Crystal clear, Mr. Bryant. Goodbye. She ended the call and stood there shaking, feeling all her carefully rebuilt confidence crumbling. Thomas Bryant had the power to destroy her career again. He had connections, influence, credibility, and she had, what? A 3-month work history and the backing of a man who was still in many ways a stranger. That evening, when Jonathan drove her home from work, he immediately noticed something was wrong. Sarah, what happened? She told him everything. The phone call, the threats, Thomas Bryant's determination to see her fail. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. He's going to do it, Jonathan. He's going to destroy this too. Everything we've built, everything I've worked for, he's going to take it all away again. Jonathan pulled the car over and turned to face her. No, he's not. You don't understand how much power he has. I understand perfectly, Jonathan interrupted gently but firmly. Thomas Bryant is a bully who abuses his position, but he's not the only person in this city with power and influence, and he just made a very big mistake. What do you mean? He threatened someone I care about, Jonathan said. Someone who has proven herself to be talented, honest and hard-working. And he did it because he's afraid that your success makes him look bad. That fear makes him vulnerable. Over the next 2 weeks, Jonathan made several phone calls. He contacted lawyers who specialized in employment discrimination. He reached out to colleagues who sat on bar association committees. He compiled evidence of Thomas Bryant's pattern of behavior. Turned out Sarah wasn't the first woman Bryant had pushed out after pregnancy. But Jonathan didn't tell Sarah any of this. He didn't want her to feel indebted or obligated. Instead, he simply told her to keep doing her excellent work and not to worry about Thomas Bryant. But what if he calls Hayes Capital? What if he tries to get me fired? Then Victoria Palmer will tell him that you're an exceptional employee and hang up, Jonathan said calmly. Your work speaks for itself, Sarah. Your colleagues respect you. Your supervisors value you. One vindictive man's phone call isn't going to change that. What neither of them expected was for Thomas Bryant's threats to manifest in a different, more dangerous way. It started with small things. Sarah noticed someone watching her as she left work. The same dark sedan appeared on her street multiple times. She received hang-up calls in the middle of the night. Then 2 weeks after Bryant's initial call, things escalated. Sarah was walking to her car after work when a man approached her in the parking garage. He was large, intimidating, and moved with the practiced ease of someone comfortable with violence. "Sarah Williams?" he asked. "Yes." She took a step back, her hand reaching for her phone. "Message from Mr. Bryant. You didn't take his advice. Now there are consequences. Consider this your only warning." He didn't touch her, but the threat was clear. Then he walked away, disappearing into the garage. Sarah made it to her car before the shaking started. She called Jonathan immediately, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "He's escalating. Thomas Bryant sent someone to threaten me. Jonathan, I'm scared. Not just for myself, for my children. What if he comes to the house? What if he tries to hurt Ethan or Rose? Where are you right now?" Jonathan's voice was calm but urgent. "In my car, in the parking garage at work. Lock your doors. I'm calling the police right now. Don't leave until they arrive." The police took her statement, reviewed the security footage, and confirmed what she already knew. The man had been careful not to do anything technically illegal. He hadn't touched her, hadn't made explicit threats, just consequences and a warning. That night, Jonathan sat with Sarah in the living room after the children were asleep. "We need to discuss options," he said gently. "I can hire private security to watch the house. We can file for a restraining order against Bryant. We can, or I can quit my job," Sarah said quietly. "That's what he wants. If I quit, he'll leave us alone." "If you quit, he wins," Jonathan said firmly. "He gets to destroy your career again, and he learns that threatening you works. Is that really what you want?" Sarah put her face in her hands. "I don't know what I want except for my children to be safe." "They will be safe," Jonathan promised. "I won't let Thomas Bryant hurt you or your family. But Sarah, you need to understand something. I'm not just offering security guards or legal protection. I'm offering to fight this battle with you, for as long as it takes." "Why?" Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this? This isn't your fight. We're not your responsibility." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment before answering. "You're right that you're not my responsibility. But you've become important to me. Sarah, you and your children have brought meaning back into my life, and I can't stand by and watch someone hurt people I care about." The next day, Jonathan made more phone calls. This time he didn't just contact lawyers and colleagues. He contacted reporters, business partners who had dealings with Morrison and Associates, and board members of professional organizations where Thomas Bryant held positions. The evidence of Bryant's pattern of discrimination and harassment was compiled into a formal complaint to the State Bar Association. 3 other women came forward with similar stories, and suddenly, Thomas Bryant found himself facing the kind of scrutiny he had always managed to avoid. Within a month, Morrison and Associates quietly announced that Thomas Bryant was pursuing other opportunities. Translation: they'd forced him out before the scandal could damage the entire firm. When Sarah heard the news, she couldn't quite believe it. "He's gone. Really gone. Really gone," Jonathan confirmed. "And he won't be able to hurt your career anymore. Several people in the legal community are aware of what he did, not just to you, but to other women. His reputation is damaged beyond repair." Sarah sat down heavily, overwhelmed by relief and disbelief. "You did this. You made this happen." "Justice made this happen," Jonathan corrected gently. "I just helped facilitate it. Bryant's own actions destroyed him, Sarah. The pattern of discrimination, the harassment, the threats, it was all there. It just needed someone with resources to bring it to light. For the first time since Thomas Bryant had called her office weeks ago, Sarah felt like she could breathe fully. The shadow that had been hanging over her newfound stability was gone. Not temporarily avoided, but genuinely, permanently gone.
That evening, as they sat on the front porch after dinner, a habit that had become comfortable for both of them, Sarah spoke quietly. "Jonathan, I need to tell you something. When you first helped us, I was terrified of depending on you. Terrified that this kindness would turn into something else, something with strings attached. But you've proven over and over that your help comes without conditions or expectations." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You protected me from Thomas Bryant. You gave my children stability and safety. You've treated me like an equal even when our circumstances were desperately unequal. And I realize now that what I'm feeling isn't just gratitude." Jonathan turned to look at her, his expression carefully neutral. "What are you feeling?" "I'm falling in love with you," Sarah said simply. "And it terrifies me because I've been wrong about people before. Because depending on someone means being vulnerable to hurt. Because loving someone means risking everything we've built." Jonathan reached out and took her hand gently. "I fell in love with you months ago," he admitted. "Watching you maintain your dignity despite poverty. Watching you raise your children with values and kindness when the world had given you every reason to be bitter. Watching you refuse to let circumstances define who you are." He squeezed her hand. "But I didn't say anything because I knew you needed time. Time to trust that this was real, that I wouldn't leave, that my feelings weren't conditional on anything you had to do or be." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now I'm asking if you'll give us a chance," Jonathan said. "Not because you're grateful or dependent, but because two people who respect and care for each other want to build something together." Sarah smiled, and it was the first truly unguarded smile Jonathan had seen from her. "Yes," she said. "Let's give us a chance." They sat together on the porch as the evening deepened, holding hands, building something neither of them had expected to find, a family born not from obligation or circumstance, but from choice, respect and growing love. Inside, Ethan peeked out the window at them and smiled. He didn't fully understand what was happening between his mother and Mr. Hayes, but he recognized the feeling in the air. It was the same feeling he got when Rose laughed, when Mama sang while making breakfast, when everything felt safe and right. It felt like home. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered the promise he'd made in a grocery store months ago. "I'll pay you back when I grow up," he'd said. He was starting to understand that some promises couldn't be paid back with money. Some promises had to be paid forward with kindness, with character, with becoming the kind of person who helped others the way Mr. Hayes had helped them. Ethan closed the curtain and went back to his homework, already planning how he would keep that promise when he grew up. 6 months after that conversation on the porch, Sarah and Jonathan's relationship had deepened into something neither had expected to find at this stage of their lives. They moved slowly, carefully, always mindful of Ethan and Rose's need for stability. Jonathan never stayed overnight, never pushed for more than Sarah was ready to give, never tried to replace the children's absent father. But he was present. Consistently, reliably present. He attended Ethan's school performances and parent-teacher conferences. He sat on the floor playing peekaboo with Rose until she dissolved into giggles. He listened when Sarah talked about her day at work, offering advice when she asked for it and simply listening when she didn't. One evening in September, as they watched Ethan and Rose play in the backyard, Jonathan turned to Sarah with unusual nervousness. "There's something I need to talk to you about," he said. "Something important." Sarah's old fears flickered briefly. "Okay. I want to make this permanent," Jonathan said. "Not just our relationship, though I want that too, but the security for you and your children. The house is in your name now. I had the deed transferred last month, but I want to do more. I want to adopt Ethan and Rose legally, if you'll allow it. Not to replace their father, but to give them the legal protection and stability they deserve." Sarah's breath caught. "Jonathan, let me finish," he said gently. "I've also spoken with my attorney about setting up trust funds for both children's education, and I've been thinking about starting a foundation, something that helps families like yours, families experiencing homelessness through no fault of their own. But more than any of that, Sarah, I want to marry you. Not because I'm trying to save you or rescue you, but because I love you and I want to build a life together." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Sarah Williams, will you marry me?" Sarah looked at this man who had proven himself trustworthy in every way that mattered, who had protected her family, who had never asked for anything in return. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of joy this time. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. The marriage, the adoption, the foundation. Yes to building a life together." They told the children that evening after dinner. Ethan, now 10 years old and far more perceptive than most children his age, listened carefully as Jonathan explained that he wanted to be their father officially, legally, permanently. "Would that be okay with you, Ethan?" Jonathan asked. "I'm not trying to replace your biological father, but I'd like to be your dad in every way that counts, to be there for you, to support you, to be part of your family officially." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he said something that made both adults' eyes well with tears. "You've already been my dad in the ways that matter, Mr. Hayes. You show up, you listen, you keep your promises. That's what a real dad does, right?" "That's exactly what a real dad does," Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Then yes," Ethan said. "I'd like that very much." Rose at 2 years old didn't fully understand what was being discussed, but she toddled over to Jonathan and raised her arms, demanding to be picked up. "Dada," she said, clearly. It was one of her first real words. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the backyard of their Santa Monica home 6 months later. Just close friends, colleagues and the officiating judge. Sarah wore a simple white dress, and both children participated, Ethan as the ring bearer, Rose as the flower girl, both beaming with pride. As they exchanged vows, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years, certainty. Certainty that this was real, that it would last, that she deserved this happiness. "I promise to walk beside you," Jonathan said, "to support your dreams, to be a partner and father and friend. I promise to honor the strength that brought you through darkness, and to help you build a future worthy of that strength. I promise to trust you," Sarah said, "to let myself be loved without fear. I promise to be a partner who stands with you, not behind you. And I promise to help you find purpose in the resources you've been given, to use what we have together to help others the way you helped us." After the ceremony, as they celebrated with cake and laughter, Ethan pulled Jonathan aside. "I need to tell you something," the boy said seriously. "I still remember my promise, from the grocery store. I promised I'd pay you back when I grew up. I haven't forgotten." Jonathan crouched down to Ethan's level. "You know what, you don't need to pay me back, Ethan. What you can do instead is pay it forward. When you grow up, when you have the chance to help someone else who's struggling, you take that chance. That's how you honor what happened between us. Pay it forward," Ethan repeated thoughtfully. "I can do that. I will do that. I promise." The adoption process was finalized 3 months after the wedding, the day the judge signed the papers officially making Ethan Williams Hayes and Rose Williams Hayes Jonathan's legal children. They celebrated with a special dinner at home. "You know what this means," Jonathan said to both children. "It means that no matter what happens, we're family, legally, officially, permanently. Nobody can change that." For Ethan, who had spent so much of his short life feeling uncertain and temporary, those words meant everything. 10 years had passed since that cold December night in the Save Mart grocery store. Ethan Williams Hayes was now 19 years old, a sophomore at UCLA studying social work and public policy. He had grown into a thoughtful young man whose early experiences with poverty and homelessness had shaped his determination to help others facing similar challenges. Standing in his dorm room on a Saturday morning in December, Ethan looked at his reflection in the mirror and made a decision that had been forming in his heart for months. Today was the day he would keep the promise he'd made as a desperate 9-year-old boy. He called his father. The word came naturally now, without hesitation or qualifier. "Hey, Dad," Ethan said, "can you drive me somewhere special today? It's important." "Of course, son," Jonathan replied warmly. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. When Jonathan arrived at UCLA, Ethan was waiting outside his dorm with a small envelope clutched in his hand. He looked nervous but determined, carrying himself with the careful dignity that had been instilled in him by both his parents. "Where are we going?" Jonathan asked as Ethan climbed into the car, a newer model now, but Jonathan had kept the same make as that first night, a small sentimental gesture. "Back to where it all started," Ethan said quietly.
20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of the same Save Mart where their lives had intersected a decade earlier. The store looked almost identical, though there were different seasonal displays and the parking lot had been repaved. "Are you sure about this?" Jonathan asked, understanding what Ethan intended to do. Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination inherited from his mother. "I've been carrying this promise for 10 years, it's time." Inside the store, Ethan walked directly to the customer service counter, his heart pounding with the same rhythm it had beaten that night long ago, but for entirely different reasons now. The young woman behind the counter looked up with a practiced customer service smile. "Hi, I'm looking for Patricia," Ethan said politely. "Patricia from the checkout lanes, she's worked here for a long time." The clerk's expression brightened. "Oh, Miss Patricia, she's our head cashier supervisor now. Let me call her up front." A few minutes later, a familiar figure approached the customer service desk. Patricia looked older, her blonde hair now mostly gray, but she still carried herself with authority. When she saw Ethan and Jonathan, her eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to place faces that seemed familiar but out of context. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" she asked. Ethan took a deep breath, his mother's lessons about grace and courtesy guiding him. "Miss Patricia, you might not remember me, but 10 years ago, I was a young boy who came to your checkout line with a gallon of milk, a baby sister, and no money. I promised I would pay you back when I grew up." Recognition dawned slowly across Patricia's face, followed immediately by something that looked like deep shame and regret. Her hand flew to her chest. "Oh my lord, you're that boy. The boy with the baby." "I am, ma'am," Ethan confirmed. "And this is my father, Jonathan Hayes. He's the man who helped us that night." Patricia's eyes welled with tears. I remember everything about that night. Young man, I have thought about you so many times over these years. I have regretted how I treated you every single day since then." Her voice broke. "You were just a child trying to take care of your sister, and you were so polite, so respectful, and I was cruel to you. I was harsh and judgmental when you needed kindness. There's no excuse for how I behaved." Ethan smiled gently, his mother's grace evident in every word. "You don't need to apologize, Miss Patricia. You were doing your job, following the store's policies. I understand that now better than I did as a frightened child. But I was mean," Patricia insisted, tears flowing freely now. "You asked so politely, you made that promise with such sincerity, and I dismissed you. I should have found a way to help. You were having a difficult day, and I was a complicated situation you didn't expect," Ethan said with the same courtesy his mother had instilled in him from birth. "I've learned since then that people aren't always at their best when they're surprised or stressed. What matters is what we do afterward, how we grow from our mistakes and become better people." Ethan opened the envelope he'd been carrying and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "The milk cost $3.49. I calculated 10 years of compound interest at 5% annually, which comes to $5.69. But I brought $100 because I want to pay for groceries for families who might be where my family was that night." Patricia stared at the money, then at Ethan, her tears falling faster now. "Sweetheart, you don't owe me anything. You don't owe this store anything. After how I treated you, I know I don't owe it," Ethan said softly, echoing the words his father had taught him. "But I promised it, and my mother always taught me that a person is only as good as their word. Promises matter, Miss Patricia. They shape who we become and how we move through the world." Jonathan watched his son with a pride so profound it made his chest physically ache. This young man who had once been too small to reach the checkout counter without standing on tiptoe, was now tall enough to look Patricia in the eye, confident enough to face his painful past, and generous enough to transform his childhood trauma into an act of kindness for others. "Besides," Ethan continued, "this isn't really about the money. This is about showing that little boy who still lives inside me that promises can be kept, that hard times don't last forever, and that kindness ultimately wins. It's about honoring the lessons my mother taught me, that our character isn't defined by our circumstances, but by how we treat others, especially when we're struggling ourselves." Patricia accepted the money with trembling hands. "What do you want me to do with the rest?" Use it for families who are struggling, Ethan said. When someone comes in short on their grocery bill, when a parent is trying to buy formula and doesn't have enough, when children are hungry and families are desperate, use this money to show them the kindness I wish you had shown me. Give them the chance you didn't give me, but that my father gave all of us. I will, Patricia promised, her voice thick with emotion. I absolutely will, and thank you, not just for the money, but for your grace. You could have come in here angry and resentful, and I would have deserved that. Instead you came with kindness and forgiveness. That says everything about who you've become. As they prepared to leave, Patricia called out, "Wait, please, can I ask you something? What happened to you? How did your life turn out?" Ethan turned back with a radiant smile, the same smile that had first touched Jonathan's heart 10 years ago. "I'm a sophomore at UCLA on a full academic scholarship, studying social work. My little sister Rose is 11 now, and she's an honor student who plays violin beautifully. My mother Sarah earned her law degree at night while working full-time, and she's now a senior compliance attorney at a major investment firm." He paused, looking at Jonathan with genuine love and gratitude. "And this man became the father I needed, the parent who showed me that family is about choice and commitment, not just biology. He married my mother 8 years ago, and we've been a real family ever since. He taught me that the best way to repay kindness is to pay it forward to others who need it. And most importantly," Jonathan added, putting his arm around Ethan's shoulders, "we learned that families aren't just born. Sometimes they're chosen. Sometimes they're built one act of kindness at a time, one kept promise at a time." Patricia wiped her eyes with a tissue from behind the counter. I'm so incredibly glad it worked out for you. You deserved it. You deserved kindness that night, and I failed to give it to you. Thank you for being the better person, for showing me what grace looks like." "We're all just doing our best," Ethan said gently, "but we can always do better tomorrow than we did today. That's what my mom always says, and it's never too late to start." Outside in the parking lot, Ethan and Jonathan sat in the car for a moment, both processing the emotional weight of what had just happened. "How do you feel?" Jonathan asked. "Complete," Ethan said simply. "Like I finally closed a circle that's been open for 10 years. Like that promise I made as a desperate 9-year-old has finally been fulfilled." Jonathan looked at the young man Ethan had become, confident, compassionate, purposeful. "You know what I realized in there? That little boy who promised to pay for milk didn't just grow up. He grew into exactly the kind of person the world desperately needs more of, and that's all your mother's doing. She raised you with those values even when life gave her every reason to become bitter. Mom always said that how we treat people, especially when we're having hard times, shows what we're really made of inside," Ethan said. "She never let our circumstances become an excuse for bad behavior or rudeness. Even when we had nothing, she insisted we maintain our dignity and treat others with respect. She's an extraordinary woman," Jonathan said. "I'm lucky she gave me a chance to be part of your family." "We're all lucky," Ethan agreed. "We found each other when we all needed it most." As they drove home through the streets of Los Angeles, Ethan felt something he had never experienced before, the profound satisfaction that comes from keeping a promise that seemed impossible when you made it. He had been 9 years old, hungry, scared and desperate when he had spoken those words. "I promise to pay when I grow up." But he hadn't just paid back the money, he had paid forward the kindness. He had transformed his childhood trauma into a source of strength that would ripple outward, touching lives he would never know. That evening, at the dinner table they had shared for 10 years, Ethan told his family about the visit to the store. Sarah, now 44, and carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt her life from ashes, listened with tears in her eyes. Rose, now 11 and every bit as thoughtful as her brother, sat forward excitedly. "So you really kept your promise, after all these years." "I really did," Ethan confirmed. "Just like Mom always taught us, our word is our bond." Rose beamed with pride. "That's amazing, Ethan. You're like the best big brother ever." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. "You've always made me so proud, sweetheart. Not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are. You're kind, you're thoughtful, you keep your promises. Those are the things that truly matter in life." Jonathan raised his glass of water. "To Ethan Williams Hayes, who proved that the most important promises aren't the ones we make to other people. They're the ones we make to ourselves about who we're going to become." After dinner, as they cleaned up together, a family ritual they had maintained throughout the years, Sarah pulled Jonathan aside. "I've been thinking about something," she said, "about what you mentioned years ago, about starting a foundation. I think it's time we actually did it." Jonathan's eyes lit up with interest. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I mean starting a real non-profit organization," Sarah explained, her professional experience evident in how she'd already begun planning. "Something that provides comprehensive support for families experiencing homelessness, not just shelter, but job training, legal assistance, childcare, mental health services, educational support for children, everything we needed and more. A place that treats people with dignity and respect, not as charity cases or statistics." "That's exactly what I've been thinking too," Jonathan said. "I could provide the initial funding and infrastructure. I've actually been setting aside resources for years, waiting for the right time and the right partner. And I could handle the legal and organizational structure," Sarah added. "Plus I know firsthand what services are actually needed versus what most organizations assume is needed. I understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of charity that comes with judgment and conditions." Over the next 8 months they worked together to establish the Williams Hayes Family Foundation. The name was chosen deliberately, honoring both Sarah's maiden name and Jonathan's surname, symbolizing their equal partnership in every sense. Ethan took a gap year from UCLA to help with the foundation's launch, applying everything he was learning about social work to the practical work of building systems that actually helped people. Rose, despite being only 11, contributed ideas about what would have helped her when they were homeless, things adults often didn't think about, like having a safe place for kids to do homework or access to books and art supplies. The foundation's headquarters opened in a renovated building in downtown Los Angeles. It provided transitional housing for up to 20 families at a time, along with comprehensive support services. But more than that, it operated on a philosophy that Sarah had insisted upon from the beginning: treating clients with dignity and respect, recognizing their agency and capabilities, never making them feel lesser or dependent. "We're not saviors," Sarah told the staff at their first training session, her voice carrying the authority of lived experience. "We're partners walking alongside families during their most difficult times. Never forget that every person we serve has skills, talents, dreams, and value, regardless of their current circumstances. Our job is to help them access resources and opportunities, not to fix them or rescue them. They're not broken, they're facing temporary circumstances that require support." The first family the foundation served was Jennifer Martinez, a young single mother with 3 small children, who had been living in their car for 2 months. Ethan conducted her intake interview, and the moment he told her about his own experience with homelessness, something shifted in Jennifer's eyes. "You really understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're not just someone who read about it in a textbook, you've lived it." "I have," Ethan confirmed gently, "and I want to tell you something that someone told me when I was at my lowest point. You are not broken, you are not a failure. You are a mother doing everything you can to protect your children in an impossible situation, and there is absolutely no shame in that. What you're experiencing is temporary circumstances, not a permanent identity." Over the next 6 months, Jennifer participated in the foundation's job training program, received legal help with an unfair eviction, and eventually secured a position as a medical assistant. Her children enrolled in school, received tutoring support, and began to thrive. When her family graduated from the program and moved into their own apartment, Jennifer stood in front of the foundation's board with tears of gratitude. "You didn't just give us shelter," she said, "you gave us our dignity back. You treated us like people worthy of respect, not problems to be managed. That's what made all the difference." As word spread about the foundation's approach and success rate, they began receiving requests for consultation from other organizations. Sarah found herself traveling to conferences, speaking about dignity-based service delivery and why it mattered. Jonathan used his business connections to create employment pipelines, partnering with companies willing to give foundation graduates a fair chance at good jobs. But it was Ethan who became the foundation's most powerful advocate. During his junior year at UCLA, he began writing a memoir about their family's journey, from that desperate night in the grocery store through homelessness, Jonathan's intervention, and the building of the foundation. He titled it The Promise, A Story of Poverty, Kindness, and the Family We Choose. The book was raw, honest, and deeply moving, chronicling their experiences with unflinching honesty while maintaining respect for everyone involved, even those who had been unkind. When a literary agent read the manuscript, she called Ethan immediately. "This is exactly the kind of story the world needs right now. It's hopeful without being unrealistic, honest without being exploitative, and deeply human. I want to represent this book." The book was published during Ethan's senior year at UCLA and became an unexpected bestseller. But more importantly than commercial success, it began to change conversations about homelessness and poverty. Instead of abstract statistics and policy debates, people were reading about a real family with names and faces and dreams, a family that could have been their neighbors, their friends, themselves in different circumstances. Letters began arriving at the foundation from all over the country. People who had read the book and been moved to volunteer or donate. Families experiencing homelessness who felt less alone after reading their story. Social workers who wanted to learn about their approach to dignified service delivery.
One letter from a woman named Patricia arrived addressed to Ethan personally. In it, the former Save Mart cashier wrote, "Dear Ethan, I bought your book and read it in one sitting, crying through most of it. Your grace and forgiveness toward me was more than I deserved. I want you to know that I've used the $100 you gave me exactly as you asked to help families in need, but I've also done more. I've changed how I treat customers, especially those who are clearly struggling. I've trained new employees to see people, not problems. I've donated to your foundation, and I've shared your story with everyone who will listen. Thank you for teaching an old woman that it's never too late to become a better person. With gratitude and respect, Patricia." When Ethan read the letter aloud to his family, everyone was quiet for a moment, processing the full circle of kindness and redemption. "That's the ripple effect," Sarah said finally. "One act of kindness leads to another, which leads to another. We can't always see how far it spreads, but it does spread." 5 years after Ethan's book was published, the Williams-Hayes family gathered for a moment they had never imagined possible. Ethan, now 24 and freshly graduated with a doctorate in social work from UC Berkeley, was being honored at the National Conference on Family Services and Homelessness as one of America's 30 under 30 social innovators. The Los Angeles Convention Center was filled with more than 1,200 people, social workers, policymakers, nonprofit leaders, and families who had once stood where Ethan's family had stood years ago. Backstage, Ethan waited to deliver the keynote address, his heart pounding as memories of a very different life surfaced. In the front row sat his family. Sarah, 49, now served as executive director of the Williams-Hayes Family Foundation and was nationally respected for her work on family homelessness and dignity-centered services. Rose, 16, was preparing for her junior year at an elite private high school, already being courted by top universities for both her academic excellence and her advocacy. Jonathan, 58, had left venture capital behind entirely to focus on the foundation and had recently published his own book about chosen families and purpose. As Ethan stepped onto the stage, the applause thundered. He stood at the podium, took a breath, and began. 14 years ago, he said, I stood in a grocery store and made a promise that felt impossible. I was 9 years old, holding my baby sister trying to buy milk with money I didn't have. I promised the cashier I would pay her back when I grew up. The room fell silent, but promises, Ethan continued, aren't just about keeping your word to others, they're about keeping faith with the person you hope to become. That little boy wasn't just promising to pay for milk, he was promising that his story wouldn't end in desperation. He spoke next about the ripple effect of kindness, how one man's decision to see humanity instead of circumstance had transformed not only his family but thousands of others. Then he turned to his mother. My mother taught us that circumstances don't define character, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Even when we were homeless, she never let us become bitter. She taught us to be polite, to be kind, to keep our promises, and to treat people with respect no matter how they treated us. Those lessons saved us. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as Ethan continued. She taught us that dignity isn't something you lose when you lose everything else. It's something you carry inside you. That dignity is the reason my father stopped to help us that night, because even in our worst moment we still knew who we were. Behind him, a slide appeared showing the Williams-Hayes Family Foundation building. This center opened 5 years ago, Ethan said. Since then we've served over 4,000 families. 87% of them achieved stable housing and employment within a year. But our real success isn't in numbers, it's in philosophy that every family deserves to be seen, heard, and supported with dignity. More images followed: parents earning degrees, children graduating, families moving into their own homes. Each photo told a story reclaimed. Jennifer Martinez came to us 5 years ago, Ethan said. She was living in her car with 3 kids. Today she's a registered nurse. Her daughter just graduated valedictorian. Her sons are college-bound. And now Jennifer volunteers every weekend, helping other families find their way forward. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan shared stories that all returned to the same truth: real change begins with human connection. Our story could have ended in that grocery store, he said softly, or under a freeway overpass. But it didn't, because someone chose to see our worth instead of our circumstances. Because my father understood that help isn't charity, it's shared humanity. He looked at Jonathan. My father taught me that love is a daily choice, to show up, to believe in people, to invest in their future. And my mother taught me that dignity is something you never surrender. The final slide showed their family at Thanksgiving, surrounded by foundation graduates, laughing together. This is our legacy, Ethan said. Not money or buildings, but families healed, children who believe in their futures, parents who rediscovered their strength. Stepping away from the podium, he addressed the audience directly. I challenged myself to keep a promise made by a desperate 9-year-old. Now I challenge you. Remember the promises you made when you were young. They still matter. The room was silent. You don't need wealth to change a life, Ethan said. You just need to see someone's humanity and walk beside them. He smiled. Growing up isn't about success. It's about becoming someone your younger self would believe in. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Ethan looked not at the crowd, but at his family. Later during the book signing, a young mother whispered, "I'm living in my car, but your story reminded me this is just a chapter." Ethan wrote, "Your story is still being written. Keep your dignity, keep your kindness." Outside, Jonathan put an arm around his son. "You kept your promise." "We all did," Ethan replied. That night, driving home through Los Angeles, they knew the promise made in a grocery store had become something far greater. A light passed forward. Because in the end, it was never about $3.49, it was about kindness, dignity, and impossible promises worth keeping.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.